Welcome back, Flashbacks. I'm Tony from Comic Book Fans United. This week, welcome to Earth 2. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this has been the biggest episode I think this series has really done since the pilot. This is the first episode in a long time I've had to take this many notes, and maybe the most notes I've ever taken on any episode of The Flash. So because of that, I'm going to break away from the format I've gotten used to, where I break down the characters and locations, and then I basically boil it down to towards the end where I get to like the interesting little tidbits. This time I'm going to go piece by piece, because I went frame by frame in this episode to try to get every single little factoid I could possibly get out of it. So without further ado, let's just get started. Now for starters, this episode opens with Barry basically closing all of the breaches in Central City that connect Earth 1 to Earth 2. Now this is important because a lot of people are still speculating on the identity of Zoom. And I'm not going to go into any of that speculation, but I wanted to bring that up because by the time they cross over into Earth 2, there are no working breaches that connect the two Earths. So that's going to be important when you try to figure out exactly who Zoom might be and might rule out who he might not be. We see Barry, Cisco, and Earth 2 Harrison Wells jump into the breach that connects the two Earths. And during that travel to Earth 2, we get a quick glimpse of the overall multiverse, or at least a nugget of the multiverse. And during that travel, we get to see the flashes of the following characters. We get to see what I'm assuming is Connor Hawke that will appear in Legends of Tomorrow. We get a flashback to John Wesley Shipp's Flash from the 90s, which was a nice little touch. We get Melissa Benoist from Supergirl, particularly a shot lifted from the pilot, because now we know that both the Flash and Supergirl are going to have a crossover coming up in the spring. We see Gorilla Grodd when he first entered Gorilla City at the end of the last episode he appeared in. We get a quick glimpse at Jonah Hex because we know he's going to show up again in Legends of Tomorrow. And lastly, we get what looks to be a shot of a Legion of Superheroes flight ring. Now, this one's the most interesting one because we didn't know it was going to come up. There was no talk of Legion of Superheroes so far in the DC universe. And given the way it looks, it can be one of two things. It can be a Legion of Superheroes flight ring that is located in a museum, the same one that Booster Gold works in when he's a janitor, the same ring that he will eventually steal and then take Skeets with him back into the, at least our timeline from the future, and then pick up the mantle of Booster Gold. Or it might actually be a Legion flight ring from the far distant future. Either way, it's a really, really cool thing to throw in there, and of all the things that we've possibly seen from potential Connor Hawke and Supergirl, this one's the one that got me most excited. So I mentioned this when we got our first glimpse at Earth 2 in the series, that Earth 2 is going to be a Silver Age Earth, and this episode solidified that. From the fashion of clothes that they wear, to the style of cars that they're driving, to the weapons that they're using Tommy guns and revolvers mostly, to even the fact that Jitterbugs has now become a lounge, and we see Joe West being a lounge singer. I'll get to him in a little bit, but it really cemented that fact that this is a Earth that kind of has a pastiche American vibe to it. Henry Hewitt made a quick cameo in this episode, and not as Tokamak, the villain that we saw fight Jefferson Jackson when he became Firestorm. Now he's just a lab assistant on Earth 2, and he's not a villain. For those with a keen eye, you saw that in Earth 2, Leonard Snart, or A Snart for that matter, has become the mayor of Central City, which is a great departure from the Snarts of Earth 1, who are an entire family of criminals. I brought up in the last episode how we'll probably see Cisco become field active, and that didn't take long because that's exactly what we see in this episode. He's out on the field, he has his glasses with him, he's not in full costume, but he does have a costume with him, and it's very fitting to the character that Cisco portrays now. But, given revelations later on in the episode, I'm now confident we will see Cisco in a more traditional Vibe outfit, or at least something close to what we will see later on in this episode when I get to that. So when they get to Earth 2, Vibe's powers don't really work, or at least his glasses don't, and that's because Earth 2 vibrates at a different frequency than Earth 1 does, and the glasses are going to have to be modified because of this. Now this is important to take note of because in Crisis on Infinite Earths, all the Earths vibrated on a different frequency, and the Anti-Monitor in that story decided to collapse all the universes in on themselves by putting them all on the same frequency level. And ultimately it resulted in one Earth encapsulating different characters from different Earths, so that way DC could have just one Earth containing all of these great characters. I'm not saying that's going to happen in this series, but it's something to take note of because Crisis on Infinite Earths was mentioned way back in the pilot of episode 1, and it's always going to be looming ahead because it's a Barry Allen story. Something I never expected this series to ever do, maybe as a side joke somewhere, but we actually get a Barry Allen that is very much like the Barry Allen from the classic DC comics, where he's a dork wearing a bow tie and he works as a crime scene investigator. The Barry Allen of Earth 2, for all intents and purposes, is the DC Comics Barry Allen prior to his return in the 2000s. He had the bow tie, he was a dork, granted, he's not the Flash on Earth 2, but that's the Barry Allen that most comic readers were familiar with. One of my favorite moments in this episode is when Barry goes to the Central City Police Department of Earth 2. Now on Earth 1 there's that giant plaque of a bunch of Greek gods that's supposed to be a representation of the Justice League. Well on Earth 2, because it's a Silver Age, it's a plaque of police officers and soldiers, and underneath it, it says, "A free and just society." Basically being a nod to the Justice Society that is synonymous with Golden Age and Silver Age characters. Continuing with a trend set by Henry Hewitt at the top of the episode, we see more heroes becoming villains and now villains becoming heroes. We see Captain Singh being a common criminal, and we see Deadshot actually on Earth 2 in Central City as a police officer. And he's a terrible shot. On top of that, the Detective West of the Central City Police Department is Iris West, not Joe West, and she is already married to Earth 2's Barry Allen. If you remember back several episodes ago when we first really got introduced to the Earth 2 Harrison Wells and Jay Garrick on Earth 2, Harrison Wells had just developed that device that's kind of like a watch that detects metahumans, and he used that to basically out Cisco as a metahuman. Well, on Earth 2 at this point, it's a widely distributed piece of technology that everybody seems to have, because it seems like everybody's afraid of metahumans because of the terror that Zoom really presents to the entire city. And this is actually kind of first used as a gag when Iris detects that Barry might actually be a metahuman, and it's brushed off basically being, oh, maybe it's malfunctioning. But I didn't catch it at first, but when I saw it again, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. Harry actually developed that, like, back at the beginning of the season. So not only do we finally get Killer Frost in this episode, but we actually get to see the return of Robbie Amell as Ronnie Raymond, only this time he's going to be portraying Deathstorm instead of Firestorm. Now, Killer Frost is a long-running Firestorm villain, and has kind of gotten a resurgence, at least during the Forever Evil event in the New 52, where she was kind of sort of made an anti-hero, much like a lot of other villains. Deathstorm here is not quite the Deathstorm from Forever Evil, and is certainly not the Deathstorm from Blackest Night, but it's kind of one of those things where we needed an evil Firestorm, and we wanted to see Robbie Amell again. So using the name Deathstorm ultimately is not a big deal, but at least we do get to confirm that he is still fused with Professor Stein, and he's been fused with Professor Stein basically from the beginning, and has kept him trapped within his mind this entire time, to the point where Professor Stein isn't even fighting anymore. You know how I said when they traveled through the multiverse that was one of the coolest things ever? And then they topped it in a sense by having that nod to the Justice Society with that plaque? Well, then they kind of just blew both of those moments out of the water for me. And I know this is just fan service, and it's probably never going to be delivered on, but you know what, never say never with Berlanti at this point. But a goddamn phone blows that all out of the water. Because the speed dial on the phone reads such. There's a speed dial for Dad, which is most likely for Joe West. There's a speed dial for Mom and Dad, which is most likely for the Allens, Barry's parents. Then there's speed dial for Eddie, which is interesting to note because this Eddie, we don't know his relationship to Iris and Barry. And then we get speed dial for Bruce, Hal, and Diana. Batman, Green Lantern, Wonder Woman. If it had Clark on it, forget it. I would like game over. You can end your season right here. I don't need any more. And I know I'm overblowing this whole phone thing, but seriously, Bruce Wayne, Diana Prince, and Hal Jordan are friends with Barry Allen on Earth 2. And because of that phone, we get to have a really nice, touching moment between Barry and his mother again. And this is not his actual mother. This is his mother on Earth 2, but for him it doesn't matter. To hear her voice again and to hear her happy and be happy with her father is so touching to the point where like it got me emotional. I'm sure Kevin Smith was crying somewhere at home, but it was really, really cool. And on top of that, she dropped some more Easter eggs on us, where we already knew Atlantis never sank on Earth 2 because Jay had told us in a few episodes ago. But now we find out that it's a location spot and it's a tourist spot. And Barry's actually sending his parents there. On top of that, we know that Jay Garrick has a good close friend who lives there, which is most likely the Earth 2's version of Aquaman. Jesus Christ, there are so many Justice League references and Justice Society references in this one episode. This is why it's so mind-blowing to think that they are just able to get away with just name drops like this, and it's characters we'll probably never see. I know I've said this before, but still, it's this kind of just acknowledgement of the obvious that seems to go unsaid in so many other shows. This was not done in previous DC shows. This is not really done all that often on Arrow. This is barely done on Supergirl. And Marvel has trouble just naming things. So when you see these moments, it's just so great and so special and so amazing that, you know, I know we're never gonna see this Batman, but it would be awesome just to get a fucking silhouette. Now, I mentioned it a little earlier, but in this episode we get to see Earth 1 Barry masquerade as Barry from Earth 2, and he and his wife, Iris, go to Jitterbugs to see Iris's dad, Joe, perform. Now, it's a nice nod to the actor playing Joe West, Jesse Martin, is that we get to hear him sing, and Jesse Martin is actually well known for his work on Broadway. And to be honest, the dude's got a great voice, so Jesse Martin, man, I didn't think you could get better, and you prove me wrong every single time you step up to bat. Now, I'm not going to pretend like this next part is as amazing as the rest of this episode. This was kind of the down point of the episode where we get introduced to Adam Fells, the Geomancer. But a few things here. One, Geomancer is another Jeff Johns created character. Granted, he created him alongside David Goyer when he worked on the Justice Society book. Geomancer isn't really that important. He's kind of just a throwaway villain, and that's the way he feels in this episode. But what's interesting to note is that we get the reveal that Jay was not exactly quite honest with us all season. And what took his speed was not Zoom, but his experimentation with Velocity 6. And he and Caitlin basically come up with a Velocity 7 for him to combat Geomancer. And in the process, we get to see Jay do something really cool. He does this really cool hat trick where he basically creates shockwaves by smacking the back of the hat really fast. But the Velocity 7 wears off real fast. Now, I covered this when I talked about Velocity 6, in that eventually we may see it lead to Velocity 9, which is something that was tied to Vandal Savage. Now, Vandal Savage is off doing his own thing on Legends of Tomorrow, and I don't think we're going to see the two shows cross over because Flash has a lot on his plate already, and so does Legends of Tomorrow. But I am now confident we will at least get to Velocity 9, and by the time we do, by that point, we will have a perfectly healthy speedster Jay Garrick. Speaking of Jay Garrick, something he has that Barry does not. On his Earth, he has a statue already dedicated to him. Now, at first, I thought it was just a War of America statue because he had said that that's where the hat came from. But if you look at the image real close, you actually see that the statue is dedicated to Jay Garrick. And I just was like, oh hey, look at that. It's like the first step towards seeing a Flash museum in this show. And granted, we've gotten glimpses of them in the last season, but it's just nice to see that heroes on Earth 2 are celebrated. Now this one, I'm maybe stretching a bit, but the look of Iris West when she's in her full flak outfit kind of reminded me of Ellen Yindel from The Dark Knight Returns, but I couldn't actually find an image that suited it, and I was thinking, well, maybe I'm misremembering something. Maybe it wasn't Ellen Yindel, maybe it was another character, but I'm pretty confident this look that Iris is rocking is pulled from the pages of a particular DC book, and for the life of me I can't remember. So I'm actually asking you guys, help me out here. What exactly is this from? Because it's definitely something. So I said I was going to get back to Cisco, and towards the end of the episode we see Cisco back out on the field, and he runs into his Earth 2 doppelganger, which he couldn't track down. And it turns out that Earth 2 Cisco Ramon is known as Reverb, and he's a villain who works with Zoom. And what was really cool about Reverb, besides his unique choice in hairstyles and speaking mannerisms, was the fact that Reverb really embodies all of Vibe's power set. And he gives Cisco the hint that he has more to him than to just know what can happen or locate people from alternate Earths. We see that he will have like these force powers, kind of like vibration powers or vibrational wave powers. And this is something that, you know, I've wanted to talk about before, but Vibe's powers are just kind of very difficult to put into words. You kind of have to just see them to see how they work. And I was waiting for this moment for it to happen so that way I can be like, yeah, that's exactly what he does. But again, it was a great performance by Cisco on both parts, or by our own particular Fredo from Comic Book Fans United. And to wrap it all up, Zoom shows up, kills Deathstorm, kills Reverb, God rest Fredo, kidnaps Barry Allen, and brings him back to the same location where he's keeping Jesse Quick. As well as another mysterious character who we see in a mask. And I'm not gonna pretend like the first time I saw that character I was like, holy shit, that looks like Gladiator from Marvel. But I don't know who this character is, and I know everyone's going to speculate who it could be. I'm not going to throw my hat into that one. I want to wait and see. It's going to be cool. It could be a huge bombshell, and I'm sure it will be. But that was the last moment where I just went, oh Jesus, what more can this episode really bring us? And we're going to have to wait a week to find out. And that wraps it up for this exhausting coverage of Welcome to Earth 2. As always, if I've missed anything, and I don't think I did because, like I said, I went crazy taking notes on this one, but I still want to find out about that Iris thing. It's driving me crazy, and I don't have enough free time to look at every single piece of art. I know someone probably knows what I'm talking about. But please be sure to let me know in the comments below, or let me know through Facebook. Please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel so that way the channel grows by sharing those links. And as always, I will see you guys when the next episode airs. You guys take care. I'm gonna go have a